Hey, good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I'd like to welcome you all to the fourth dimension. Big book study, that is. I'm glad you guys are all here. I know I'm certainly glad I'm here. I never feel more alive than when I'm sharing the miracle of God's recovery in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that I learned about in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're going to share that book tonight. Let's share it together, shall we? As we always do, let's kick off with the set aside prayer. It goes a little something like this. Sing along if you know the words. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, and about the 12 steps. And please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. Okay. And as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two parts of our book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. And for the sake of the tradition and custom of the fourth dimension big book study, everyone will please put one hand up like this. And everybody please put another hand up like this. And everybody please go, oh yeah. All right, brothers and sisters, we absolutely insist on enjoying life here in the fourth dimension. We are not a glum lot, okay? Our book says to avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery, okay? I used to deliberately manufacture misery, okay? Deliberately. I'm the kind of guy, if I don't have something to worry about, I'll start making things up, okay? Avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. We are not a glum lot. We absolutely insist on enjoying life, and I'm going to have fun tonight. I hope you will as well. It is not mandatory, but it's highly suggested. Okay, first of all, before we, hey, Aaron, I just want to say hi to Aaron. Hello, Aaron.
Hi.
I'm delighted to see you. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
You're in Ontario, is that right?
I am. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad you're here. On another note, very heartfelt welcome back to our friend Benjamin Collins. Hello, Ben. Love you, man. We missed you last week, and we heard some of the updates from your sponsees that were here, and glad to have you back, man. And hope you're feeling okay and not in too much pain. Okay, so tonight, guys, we're gonna jump right back into it. We actually have a lot to cover if we are going to finish the chapter of We Agnostics tonight. So last week we learned that lack of power is my dilemma. Okay, lack of power is my dilemma. And let me tell you something, lack of power was my dilemma before I came to AA. Lack of power is my dilemma today, and lack of power will always be my dilemma. Okay, I don't become powerful in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't become powerful. What I do is gain access to the power. Okay, and how do I do that? Through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, last week, we learned about getting access to this power, okay, and coming to believe in this power, okay, coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And we learned the first step to proposition. So again, we're in the chapter We Agnostics, guys. Let's go to page 47. Chapter We Agnostics, which means we without knowledge. We learned that last week. Agnostics is a Greek word, and it means without knowledge. We who are without knowledge or without relationship with God. It says we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Again, page 47, guys. This is the first step to proposal, okay? And if you're new to AA, and there's some new faces here tonight, I encourage you to consider asking yourself this question. But also, if you're here and you're just starting to get into sponsorship and so on, I'm going to show you exactly how I do step 2 with my guys. Okay. And the first is to go through this question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, there is a power greater than myself? Okay. That's question number 1. And that's binary. Okay. That is a yes, no. That is an affirmative or negative question. Yes or no. I either believe or I don't believe. Okay, that is it. Okay, or am I even willing to believe? What a beautiful question. Okay, and we can tie that back. If you were here last week, you would have made a little note tying that back to page 12 in the big book, or in Bill's story rather, where Bill Wilson says it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. Nothing more. If you're here and you're new and you're wondering, where does this thing start? Bill Wilson just told us. Being willing to believe in a power. It doesn't even ask us to believe in God yet. No one has said anything about God yet. Okay? Are you willing to believe there is a power? Nothing more was required for me or for you or Bill Wilson or any of us to make our beginning. That's it. Okay, that's where we start. So now we're going to continue on in the rest of this chapter, and there's a lot to read in this chapter. And one of the things I talked about this last week, this chapter used to really irritate me a lot. It irritated me for years when I was in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this chapter irritated me for even years into sobriety in this chapter, because I didn't understand it. And when I don't understand things, I get angry and I give up and I quit. Okay. And so I am so grateful that I had sponsors who sat down with me and helped me to make sense of some of this old historical information that Bill Wilson is giving us in this chapter, and this old language that he's using from the 1930s, and these references and examples that just made no sense to me at all. And I couldn't figure out, like, how, whatever this guy is talking about, what does it have to do with me wanting to drink and commit suicide today in a treatment center? I couldn't make any sense out of it. Okay. So I believe that I have a duty and a calling to help us today go through and explain the historical relevance of some of what Bill Wilson is talking through here, and how does it apply to us. At a high level, what Bill Wilson is doing in this chapter, and what we are doing, what the first 100 members are trying to teach us in the chapter We Agnostics, is how throughout human civilization, there have been many times where we believed something to be the absolute truth. We were given new information or a new set of circumstances, and that we changed our belief and we came to believe something new. Okay? And what Bill Wilson is trying to do here is he's trying to make the case that if we can change our thinking as a civilization on such large matters of belief, maybe we can keep it simple for ourselves and change our belief. He's really trying to sell people who don't believe in God on why there are good reasons to believe in God, and changing our way of thinking and changing our way of belief. Does that make sense, you guys? Yeah? Okay. We'll go through that together tonight. And one of the things, by the way, if you remember from last week, we talked about this. When I'm working with a sponsee, if they say, I don't believe, and I refuse to believe, and I'm not going to believe, like that's a difficult place for us as sponsors, okay? If a guy says, I'm angry at God, that's fine, okay? Because he has to believe in a God to be angry with. That's the litmus test for step 2. You can hate God and get sober as long as you believe there is a God to hate. Okay. And we have other steps to help you with the rest of it. Okay. Column 1, step 4. Who do I resent? Number 1, God. Great. We'll help you with that. If a guy is afraid of God, that's fine, as long as he believes there is a God to be afraid of. Okay. If someone says, I think God, I'm unforgivable. I am unforgivable. God will never forgive what I have done. That's fine. We have steps to help you with that. Okay. The only attitude that will defeat us is one of belligerent denial. No, there is no God. I refuse to believe, and so on and so forth. Okay. When I have a sponsee who is like that and proclaiming that and being that stubborn and obstinate, what I will ask as kind of a last ditch effort is to simply say, do you believe that I believe in God? Can you believe that? Can you believe that I believe? Okay. And if they can agree that they believe that I believe, we can start from there. Okay. And what our book says is, upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Okay. Because that shows willingness. If they're willing to believe that I believe, even though they have no physical evidence to it that I actually believe, but they see the effect in me. You know, somebody asked me one time, Kevin, what do you think God looks like? And I did it, and I think I meditated about it. And look, this is just me. I'm not some spiritual guru, but I'm going to share with you what I think God looks like if you're interested. Somebody asked me last week, what's your conception of God? My one word answer to that question, what's your conception of God, by the way, was just the word power, capital P, power. Okay. Lack of power. We gain access to the power. What do I think it looks like? I think it looks like a tree blowing in the wind. Okay. That's what I think God looks like to me, is a tree blowing in the wind, because we can't see the wind, but we can see the evidence of the wind in the tree moving and the leaves moving. And although I can't physically see God, I can see evidence of God in the miracles sitting before me in the little 25 Zoom squares right in front of me right now. I can see the wind of God blowing through the tree of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I can see the evidence of his miracle within all of you. And if I can say to a sponsee, do you believe that I believe? It's because he can see the evidence of what has happened in me. This thing is happening in me, and he can come to believe in that, and we can start from there. Okay, you guys with me on that? So let's get into this chapter. Bill Wilson is going to talk about some very historical, antiquated language. And and again, he's trying to sell non-believers on the reasons why there is good historical evidence for changing our belief and coming to believe in something new. And so let's start at the bottom of page 47. Brad, my sponsee, thank you so much for reading for us tonight. Brad, at the bottom there, besides a seeming inability.
Yeah, hey everybody, Brad Soloto, recovered alcoholic.
Hey, Brad.
Besides the seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were.
Okay, one of the things, I'm just going to say this very quickly. I use that line all the time. Finally beaten into a state of reasonableness, driven to AA under the lash of alcoholism. I finally became open-minded enough to start taking direction and start doing things and doing actions that I didn't think were going to work, that I didn't want to do, being told to me by people I didn't even like, but I was out of options, okay? And I really believe this, guys. And this is an important thing to remember when we're sponsoring new people. If I'm having a problem with step 9, making amends, if I'm having a problem with my willingness to do step 11, prayer meditation, if I'm having a trouble with willingness in step 12, if I don't want to do and I'm dragging kicking and screaming through a step 4 and through a step 5, if I am balking at any part of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I want everyone to show me on one hand, what step is my real problem? Everybody show me on one hand what the real problem is. I'm looking right now. I want to see everybody putting up that finger. Everybody. Step 1. It is a step 1 problem. It's always a step 1 problem. Okay? If I'm debating about whether I want to do this, I like this, I don't want to do this, okay? Doesn't matter. If I am truly know that I am faced with alcoholic destruction, if I have truly been beaten into a state of reasonableness, the rest of the steps are easy. They're easy. I'll take them joyously, okay? Because I have come to realize that my situation is absolutely hopeless, okay? I may not be ready to come to believe in a power greater than myself, but if I have come to believe that my situation is absolutely hopeless, I'm ready to begin, okay? You may not be ready to decide that you want what we have, but if you're absolutely certain that you don't want what you have anymore, we are here to help, okay? All right, Brad, back to you.
The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at some of them. The practical individual today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate,
I love that line, outward appearances are not inward reality at all, okay? And that has to do, my sponsor used to say, Kevin, you're a master of image maintenance, okay? That my outside appearance and my inward reality are not always the same thing, okay? I am fully capable of going into an AA meeting and Kevin, how you doing? Oh, I'm fantastic. Just awesome. Yeah, I'm so sober I can barely stand it. Thank you for asking, fantastic. Okay. We all remember Fred. Okay. End of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Drinks. He's drunk in like an hour after that. Not a cloud on the horizon. End of a perfect day. Outward appearance is not inward reality at all. Okay. And it's a real joy in life to no longer have to be a chameleon, where my outsides and my insides, I can be the same person all the time. Okay. So now we're going to start talking about some scientific stuff. Okay. And the first thing that Bill Wilson's going to talk about here is this idea of like electrons and protons and atoms and all that stuff. Okay. Everyone heard of that kind of stuff before. You don't have to be a PhD in physics, but have you heard? I'm looking for a show of hands here, guys. Who here has heard of like protons and electrons and atoms and so on and so forth? We all know that, right? And we all know, hey, this book is really just a bunch of little things spinning around each other, and we all kind of take that for granted. But none of us have really ever seen it or have any reason to actually believe that other than somebody just told us that. And we believe it, okay? So Bill Wilson is just using that example here for what we're about to read as a way of saying, hey, we believe a lot of things already, one of Danella, my friends, her name is Lulu. Richard knows Lulu. Richard, Lulu has a great line. She's like, I've been married 3 times. I believe a lot of things. Okay. That's a funny line, man. Okay. And simply, we're just talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous, coming to believe it shouldn't be that hard. We believe a lot of things already. Okay. And this first line here, Brad, I'm just going to jump in. It says, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons. And I read that and I just kind of threw the book away. I'm like, what is this cat talking about, man? Prosaic just means average, run of the mill, typical. Now, steel girder, what's that? That's like an I-beam, okay? And if you think about the context, Bill Wilson was writing this in Manhattan in the 1930s. And what was being built right outside his window in downtown Manhattan? Skyscrapers, some of the first skyscrapers ever in history. So Bill Wilson really is like looking out on the street, looking out his window, writing this book, and he sees buildings being built. And the Brazaic steel girder is a mass of electrons. That's all he's talking about. Okay, he might as well be talking about drywall or 2x4s. Okay, same thing. He's just saying building materials are built out of this type of stuff. Brad, back to you.
The prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of...
So I love that line. We read wordy books and indulged in windy arguments. Okay. That's me, man. Especially when I came to AA, man. I was in university and I was studying religious philosophy, and I was an atheist at that point in my life, man. Okay. I was an atheist. And I once almost started a riot at a treatment center trying to get all the atheists to rise up against the people who believed in God. Okay. Like I was that guy. Okay. And what happened? I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. By what? The lash of alcoholism. Okay. I was beaten into a place where I had no other alternative that I could see other than to completely surrender to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore surrender completely to the idea to become willing in some type of power. Okay. But man, I read wordy books and indulged in windy arguments, man. And I would go to the New Age bookstore and in chapters, when I was trying to find spirituality, because that's the name of the game, right? Spirituality is the name of the game. And I play to win, man. So I'm going to out spiritual you. Immediately, I'm competitive. That's how I am. So when I decided I was going to find God, I was going to find a better God than yours, man. That's for sure. And so I would go to chapters and I would read every New Age book under the sun that I could find. I read every book I could get my hands on, except one. This one. This is the only book I wouldn't read. And consequently, I kept getting drunk over and over and over and over and over and over and over for years in AA. Okay. Not for lack of going to meetings. Going to meetings wasn't my problem. Taking the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, that was my problem. Okay. And there's no way for me to do that unless I am understanding what is in this book. And I know what's in this book, and I follow this program of action. This book is a treasure map. Okay. And if I'm going to find the treasure, I have to follow the directions. Okay. And there is treasure, by the way. There's all kinds of treasure. Okay. Anyway, Brad, back to you.
Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves.
Now that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. That was a tough one for me when I was new, is this idea that I was going to start getting stuff from religion. Like, no, thank you, man. Okay, I'm here for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm here to get sober, and that's it. And thank God that my mind is now much, much, much more open to it. But if you're here and you're new, man, and you bristle with antagonism every time someone starts to talk about God, or particularly something religious, just know, like, I'm with you and I understand. Okay. That stuff can be very hard to start getting our arms around. So please don't be put off or offended if I reference something from religion. That said, I I will take stuff from Christianity, from the Bible. I think Jesus was like has a ton of beautiful stuff to say, but I'll also take stuff from Judaism, from Islam. I do Buddhist meditation almost on a nightly basis, man. Look, when I was out drinking, I didn't care what brand it was. Okay. I didn't, I wasn't fussy. Okay. And I want the biggest buzz I can, man. So I'll take it all. I'll take it all. I've been studying a lot of Judaism lately. Let me tell you something, man. There's like a lot of beautiful stuff in Judaism. Okay. So I am quick to point out where other religions are right, and I make use of what they have to offer. Back to you, Brad.
Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation of the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible, as a celebrated American statesman put it. Let's look at the record.
By the way, okay, so that fella, and I see Rob K sharing a file. If you're like, and his celebrated Americans, let's look at the record. What is he talking about? There was a politician in the 1930s. He was the governor of New York, which, not coincidentally, is where Bill Wilson lived. His name was Al Smith. He was the governor of New York State, and his favorite. Okay, Trump says fake news, or Trump says make America great again. Okay, Al Smith's thing was let's look at the record. Okay, that was his like political catchphrase. So that's why Bill Wilson is dropping that here. Okay, because he thinks that everyone kind of knows this. Maybe in the 1930s they did. None of us really know that today. Okay, so I just wanted to point them out. And every one of us has gained access to. You see that? So beautiful. One proposition we are strikingly agreed. Every one of us has gained power, has gained access to, and believes in a power greater than himself. Okay? We have gained access to and believe in a power, capital P power, greater than ourselves. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. And one of the things here as well, guys, like we gain access to and believes in, okay? We have to come to believe in something first, but then the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, the remaining steps, the remaining 12 steps are going to allow us to begin to understand that power, okay? And really develop a relationship with that power. One of the things that I confused for a long time is I kept thinking that I had to become this spiritual guy who understood God and had the awareness and had the understanding in steps 2 and 3, and then continue on with the rest of the steps. And that is not what I was being asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is not what you are being asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. It is not until step 12, at the end of the steps, where it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I kept trying to have the awakening in steps 2 and 3. That's not the way it works. In step 2, all we are doing is coming to believe. Then I start taking the action. I have gained access to, and I've come to believe in. First comes the action, then comes the understanding. Okay? If you're here, you're like, I don't understand God. It's like, not many people do. Start taking the action, and we will start to have glimpses of the fourth dimension. We will start to have glimpses of the ultimate reality of God in our lives. If I am taking the action, if I am fitting myself to be a fit spiritual condition, how do I fit myself to do that? By taking the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. Back to you, Brad.
Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they find that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happens.
Okay, I just want to point something out here. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, that's step 2. To take a certain simple attitude towards that power, that's step 3. And to do certain simple things. That is the rest of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? That is how that works. Okay? We come to believe in something, we take a certain simple attitude, and then to do certain simple things. I will reiterate, as I always do, I think the most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous is the word do. There is nothing more important than that word. The only thing that accounts in Alcoholics Anonymous is what I do. Okay? Not what I believe, not how I feel, not what I think. The only thing that matters, and the only thing that has had any bearing on my well-being as a human in my recovery from alcoholism, has been from the actions that I do. Okay? To do certain simple things. Brad, back to you.
Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith.
So as always, guys, there are many little benchmark lines in our book that I use as a benchmark to ask myself, how am I doing relative to what the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous were saying in 1939 when this book was published? They say that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important fact of their lives. I need to ask myself, is the consciousness of the presence of God today the most important fact of my life? And if not, then what is? Okay? What is the most important fact of my life? Okay? And what does that mean when I say the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of my life? And if it isn't, and if you're here and you're new and you're thinking like, what is he talking about? Okay? I encourage you to consider getting a sponsor, getting a book, getting into this work, and figuring out what that means and what that looks like for you. Okay? Many of us will find that in the pages of this book and in the fellowship at our home group, being in a moment of service, giving back to Alcoholics Anonymous, we will begin to feel the consciousness of the presence of God. When we are divinely inconvenienced by Alcoholics Anonymous and show up for our service commitments with a grateful heart is when we will begin to know the presence of God. Okay? Back to you, Brad.
This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies.
Okay, so very quickly, Christopher Columbus was an explorer. What did people believe before Christopher Columbus? Before Christopher Columbus, people believed the earth was flat. Christopher Columbus proved, except for some internet wackadoos here in the last few years, that the world is round. We used to believe the world was flat. We were given new information and a new set of circumstances, and we as a civilization changed our belief into understanding that the world is now round. Even better example, Galileo. What did people believe before Galileo? Before Galileo, people believed that the Earth was the center of the universe and that everything, including the sun, orbited around the Earth. And I think this is a really good kind of proxy for self-centeredness. Okay, we believe that the universe revolves around us when we come to AA. We have a change in belief today. Thanks to Galileo, we now believe and we know from a celestial level that we are not the center of the universe, that we orbit around the source of power, that we orbit around the sun. Okay? Back to you, Brad.
We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing.
This used to really tick me off. This is one of the most irritating parts. Who's this Professor Langley? And what's his flying machine? What is this guy talking about? Okay, what he's saying is that the Wright brothers were two bicycle repairmen from Kitty Hawk, South Carolina, who built a plane, just the two of them, and built a plane and were able to fly. You want to hear an interesting fact? Here's a weird little fact about that. The wingspan of a Boeing 747, the wingspan of that plane alone is longer than the Wright brothers' first flight. Okay? So that tells you where we've come from perspective in flying. But this Professor Langley was a guy who was contracted by the United States government and had the full force and full intellect of the United States Engineering Corps, and had the full force of the United States government behind him. And he built a flying machine, and that flying machine landed at the bottom of the Potomac River, which is a river near Washington, D.C. And it was then decided if the United States government, with its full force, was not able to build a plane, then no one would ever be able to fly. That is it. And then these two bicycle repairmen from Kitty Hawk, with a little bit of a faith and a little bit, just the little kernel of belief, were able to do something incredible. Okay? And Bill Wilson, again, is saying, we believed at one point that man would never be able to fly. Given new information, we've come to believe something new. Brad?
But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does?
Beautiful. Discarding old ideas for new. That's what we're talking about. Discarding old ideas for new. Now, if you're like, what is a longshoreman and what is a Sunday supplement? And why are they talking about exploring the moon? Like, don't they know that already happened like 60 years ago? No, they didn't. Okay. And that really proves the point in an even more prophetic way. When this book was written, no one had ever traveled to the moon yet. Now we look back and it's like, what is he talking about? Stanley Kubrick filmed that stuff years ago. Okay. Anybody? No. Moon landing faking? No. Okay. Anyway, longshoreman, a laborer. Beautiful, Rob. A longshoreman is just a guy who works on the docks and offloads boats. Okay. Well, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We don't have a lot of longshoremen here. Okay. So it's just a laborer. Okay, so they're saying if you ask a laborer, a typical person on Joe Workaday on the street, okay, and you show them a Sunday supplement. What's a Sunday supplement? In a newspaper years ago, they would have like an addition to the Sunday. So you'd get like the New York Times, but there would be like an additional piece, like a little magazine, little slice of life kind of, fun little exposés they would do on things. And so you're showing this guy on the street, this thing about, hey, one day we're going to go to the moon. Okay. And again, all Bill Wilson is saying is how often are we discarding old ideas for new? And he's trying to tie that to the God idea. The idea that we had these old beliefs that about God, these old prejudices towards God, these old ideas about religion and so on. And what Bill is trying to do is ask us to let go of that. Anybody here ever heard of the speaker Sandy Beach? Sandy B? Sandy Beach, beautiful speaker. If you've never listened to Sandy Beach, don't go to bed tonight until you've listened to a Sandy Beach talk, man. Beautiful. Okay. Sandy Beach was asked if you could describe Alcoholics Anonymous in 2 words, what would it be? And he said, I think about this a lot, man. He said, let go, let go. Okay. In step 2, we are letting go of our old ideas, our old prejudices, our old resentments about religion and about God and all that stuff that makes us bristle with antagonism. Our book says, I know all about bristling. I used to be a bristler, man. I used to be a bristler. I'm not a bristler anymore. Okay. Because my mind has been opened, not only anymore by the pain, but because I see now the benefits of this enriching, fulfilling life that we can have with God in our hearts in the 4th dimension of existence. Emmett Fox once said, the spiritual life in Alcoholics Anonymous can either be the carrot or the stick. Okay, the stick is when you whip a horse to make it go forward, it's in pain, and so it'll move forward. Okay, and the carrot is where you dangle something good in front of the horse, and so it wants to move forward. It's the good thing in front of you. Okay, and little by little, my experience with AA is that I used to have to do these things, and it was the stick because I was beaten by the lash of alcoholism to motivate me to go forward. But little by little, it'll start to change over into becoming a carrot where I'm not doing these things because I'm living in pain and fear anymore. I'm doing these things because I have never had it so good in my life ever. And I want more of it, man. I want more of it. And I want to share it with you. And I have learned that by sharing it with you, I get more of it. Okay. I want the full deal, man. And life is good today. I'm happy I'm alive today. And that was not always the case. Believe me. Believe me. There's many times in my life where I wanted to just get out of here. You know what I'm saying? And I'm very happy I'm alive today. Okay, Brad, back to you.
We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was.
Okay, so what we just read there, page 52, those are called the bedevilments. Okay. And that's a very important piece in Alcoholics Anonymous. People will often refer to this, okay, as being a very good description of alcoholism. Alcoholism when I'm drinking, and alcoholism also in sobriety. You know, I've had the privilege just recently of having many men that have multiple years of sobriety coming and asking me to sponsor them. And it's a joy. Because a lot of them, I mean, they just pick up the tools and they start running so fast because they used to have the carrot. They remember the carrot. They once had the carrot and it has now somehow become a stick again. and they want it and they want it back. Okay. And so when we look at, and these guys are multiple years sober, but they read through those bedevilments and man, it still sounds familiar. And they haven't had a drink in decades. Okay. And they read through that. And that is a really good description of alcoholism. And one of the things, it was actually Danelle who pointed it out to me, that it's very, very bright and insightful to connect these bedevilments on page 52 to the restlessness, irritability, and discontent, the spiritual malady. This is the description of the spiritual malady in alcoholism. Okay. And so when we taking our sponsees through the cycle and we talk about that spiritual malady, the restlessness, irritability, and discontent, we can tie it to these bedevilments on page 52. Okay. And again, guys, this can be when I'm drinking, and also this can be alcoholism in sobriety. And I see some long timers here nodding their heads. Okay. And one of the things, man, is that, we all know about the first surrender. Most of us know about the second surrender as well. Okay. But there are more surrenders coming. And in those surrenders, we can look back at these bedevilments, okay? And the good news is we can know that we have a way out, okay, of those. All of my problems are in the third dimension, and all of my solutions are in the fourth dimension, okay? Chuck C used to say there is one problem that contains all problems, and that problem is conscious separation from God. And there is one answer that contains all answers, and that answer is conscious contact with God. Okay? Brad, back to you. I'm going to try to not fill in so many blanks here because I want to get through this chapter before 7 p.m. On page 53, we're gonna come up here very quickly to the second step 2 proposition. So we'll go through that together for sure.
When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked for them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know.
Okay, guys, this next line, this next paragraph, this is the second step 2 proposal. So when I'm working with a newcomer, okay, or a long timer who's come back for a refresh, okay, question number 1, again, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe there's a power greater than myself? Yes or no? If so, we go on to this next question. Okay, Brad.
When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
Okay, so the first thing I'll ask them, is it safe to say that you are currently in a self-imposed crisis? Yes? Yes. Is it safe to say that you cannot postpone or evade this crisis that you are in? Yes. Okay. If I could have postponed it one more day, I would have been out there postponing it one more day. If I could have evaded it one more day, I would have been out there evading it one more day. But when I was beaten into a state of reasonableness, driven to AA under the lash of alcoholism, I was in a self-imposed crisis I could not postpone or evade. I had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? So that can be a very complicated philosophical type of question for a guy like me, okay, who is dangerously self-proclaimed intellectual, okay? Self-proclaimed, by the way. I'm the only one that proclaims that, okay? No one else is proclaiming that, okay? But I like to think I'm smart, okay? As many of us do. And the problem is, you give me a question like, is God everything or else he is nothing? I'm the kind of guy, I'll eat a handful of magic mushrooms and go to the woods and trip out on, wow, man, is God everything, man, or is else he's nothing, man? Wow. Wow, man. Okay. And so I'll trip out on that stuff and I'll get intellectual and I'll think right and I'll be right back in the bar. Okay. That's how I am. So I'm going to keep this very simple. In order for Alcoholics Anonymous to work for me, I have to find a power that can solve my problem. Okay? I've come to believe in a power. Yes, in the first question. The question is, do I believe that that power can solve my problem? So the way I reconcile this, God is everything or else he is nothing, God either is or he isn't, is this simple with newcomers. This simple. The power that I agree that I believe in question number one, that power, and we agree that you believe in that. There is a power. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Do you believe that that power is more powerful than your alcoholism? Or do you believe that your alcoholism is more powerful than that power? Without exception, every single time I've asked someone that question, they say the same thing. What do they say? No, no, no. I believe that the power is more and bigger than my alcoholism. And I say, congratulations, you're done step two. In order for step two to work, I have to believe that there is a power and I have to believe that that power is bigger than my problem. That's it. And I can move on. Brothers and sisters, I don't tell God how big my problems are. I tell my problems how big my God is. Okay? And if you don't have a big enough God, the nice thing is we can pick a new one. Okay? We can pick a bigger God that can solve your problem. Okay? And I believe that there, for every one of us, there is a God that can solve our problem. Okay? And don't worry if you don't believe in God, because God believes in you. All right? Back to you, Brad.
Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines of the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out to welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our own ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found too that we had been worshippers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved somebody or something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life, of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons, created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that. At least so the chemists said. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who proved that men could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We
Okay,
find
so just very quickly, I'm really going to try to, land the plane, if you will, tonight by 7 p.m., guys. So I'm going to talk about this very quickly. The only other thing that I do with sponsees is indicate, as it was taught to me by my first sponsor, where I find God. Where do we find him? Well, there's 4 places in our book where it says where we find him, and 3 of them are on this page. We just read the first one. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Okay, that's the first one. However, what does it say? It may be obscured by pomp, which is ego, calamity, which is trauma, which we hear a lot about these days in AA, trauma. Okay, I'll get into trauma later when we get to step 4. And worship of other things. What are other things that alcoholics would tend to worship other than God? How about money? How about relationships? How about what other people think of me? And of course, alcohol and drugs. These are other things that we worship. These worship of other things, this pomp, this calamity, cuts us off from the sunlight of the spirit. Okay, but deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. That's the first one. I'll point out the other 2. And Brad, please keep reading for us till the end of the chapter.
We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us.
We found the great reality, capital G, capital R. Where do we find it? Where do we find it? Everybody show me. Where do we find it? Deep down within. Deep down within. Okay? And the way to get in there is through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how we get connected to that power deep down within.
We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
Search diligently within yourself. Search diligently within yourself. And how do we do that? We search diligently within ourselves through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Chuck Chamberlain used to say that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a program of adding things to us. It is a program of removing things from us. Okay? He would call it uncovering, discovering, and discarding things that we need, that were no longer needed. Okay? We're not adding things to ourselves in AA. We are removing things. Okay? I read a thing about service today. The beautiful thing about service, the twofold nature, it removes our ego and also creates bliss. That's the wonderful thing about service, okay? But it removes our ego, removes that from us momentarily. We're removing things from us. We're not adding things. Okay, now we're going to read, Brad's going to read a story about an example in AA. This is from a story in the back of the book called Our Southern Friend. Brad, carry us through. We're going to land a couple minutes late tonight, guys. I hope you don't mind. And then once Brad is done reading, we'll close the meeting. Everyone, though, please feel free to stick around. What we love to do is go around the room and let all of our friends from around the world who've joined us tonight introduce yourself and say a quick hello and let us know where you're calling from, okay? And feel free to drop the name of your home group as well. Brad, back to you.
In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus, our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude had shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker. Then he knew. Even so, has God restored us all to our right minds? To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. The end.
Oh, sorry. My internet was glitching in and out. Thank you very much, Brad. Okay, that brings us to the end of the meeting. We're 2 minutes over time. Thank you all for your patience and kindness with that. Next week, we're going to read the spiritual appendix. We're going to kick off with the spiritual appendix. We're going to learn about the educational variety of spiritual awakening. And beautiful writing in towards the back of our book, and then we are going to get into step 3 next week. But round of applause, everybody. We just finished step 2.